أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافئ مزيدا والصلاة والسلام على خير الأنام وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم إننا وأن التعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والدعاء إلى الهدى والضلالة على الخير والحث والتمسك على كتاب الله وسنة رسول الله ابتغاء مرضات الله وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى. Praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, praise it's worthy of a beneficent bestower of bounties and favors, the most glorious, the most magnificent. We ask our Lord to send copious and unlimited blessings and salutations upon our beloved Prophet Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam amma ba'd. And we pay our respects to the traditional owners of the land. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, and we pay our respects to the elders past and present. So alhamdulillah, as we continue inshallah azza wa jal in terms of the intentions that an individual should have when they're sitting in the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in terms of that, not just the masjid, any place that's been decreed for congregational prayer, and for the sisters, as we said, if the sister's got a prayer mat or or a special room, if it's possible to set aside, or part of a room or somewhere to set aside just for the worship of Allah azza wa jal, those types of places will count. So the Habib Muhammad bin Ali al-Aydarus, as I said, his nickname is Habib Saad. He goes on to say, in the Arabic, as we always do, radiyallahu anhu wa ankum nafa'na bihi wa bikum. He says, an-niyatu thaniya yanwi al-muwafaqati rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam haythu qala inna Allah sanna li nabiyakum sunan al-huda wa annaha min sunan al-huda ولو صليتم في بيوتكم كما صلى هذا المتخلف إذا لتركتم سنة نبيكم لضللتم. It says there on page 57 in this text and 49 in the PDF. He says the second intention, may Allah be pleased with him and pleased with you, may Allah benefit us from him and also from you, that's the author. Intend to follow the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wasallam as he has said. In other words, the Prophet has said alayhi salatu wasallam, Allah has prescribed to your Prophet ways of guidance, and these prayers are a part of them. If you were to pray at home, as does a laggard, you would have departed from the way of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and go astray. So, in terms of what the Prophet of Allah said, it's actually part of a hadith, but it's not the full hadith. It's narrated in Muslim and other sources as well. So if we look at the full hadith, he says حدثنا أبو بكر بن أبي شيبة حدثنا إلى. He says قال عبد الله لقد رأيتنا وما يتخلف عن sorry, wrong hadith. عن عبد الله رضي الله عنه قال من سره أن يلقى الله غدا مسلما فليحافظ على هؤلاء الصلوات حيث ينادي بهن فإن الله شرع لنبيكم صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم سنن الهدى وإنهن من سنن الهدى ولو أنكم صليتم في بيوتكم كما يصلي هذا المتخلف في بيته لتركتم سنة نبيكم ولو تركتم سنة نبيكم لضللتم وما من رجل يتطهر فيحسن الطهور ثم يعمد إلى المسجد من هذه المساجد إلا كتب الله له بكل خطوة يخطوها حسنة ويرفعه بها درجة ويحط عنه بها سيئة ولقد رأيتنا وما يتخلف عنها إلا منافق معلوم النفاق ولقد كان الرجل يؤتى به يهادى بين الرجلين حتى يقام في الصف. So the whole hadith, which we'll go through in English, it's like a very potent hadith when it comes to understanding not only the obvious and outward manifest aspects of our deen, but because of the words that Allah Azza wa Jal imbued in the Prophet of Islam and the Prophet of Islam mentioned, it goes really to the essence of what it means to be a believer, and it goes to the essence of one's practice in terms of getting close to Allah Azza wa Jal, and the essence of what it means to follow the Prophet of Allah alayhi wasalam. He uses the word Sunan al-Huda, which is the prophetic tradition of guidance. In other words, whoever follows it is guided. We'll get into it, but I wonder, because I think if we just use what the Habib said, I don't think we're doing the Prophet of Islam justice, because the hadith it's not fully narrated, it's not fully related in the text. So because it's such a seminal hadith and it's such an important hadith, it's important for us to understand what he was saying, the completeness of what the Prophet of Allah ﷺ was saying, so that we can inshallah practice, and we can inshallah Azza wa Jal not only practice outwardly but practice inwardly. In other words, have a particular connection to the Prophet of Allah ﷺ, those particular a'mal, those particular deeds, those particular types of worship that he encouraged us to do, and those worships he warned us about leaving, and also how bi'idhnillah Azza wa Jal that our internal state, in terms of the attachment to those particular types of worship that guide us and bring us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how we can be connected to them internally. In other words, how our hearts and how our souls and how our existence can be connected to those outward deeds, because even if we can't perform them outwardly, then inwardly we're attached to them. And being attached to these deeds, particularly these seminal deeds and these fundamental deeds, in other words, good works, a'mal, ibadat, ta'at, there's worshipping of Allah Azza wa Jal, to be tied to them is enough. If one can't perform them because we live in a country where it's not a Muslim country, and it's sometimes hard to perform these deeds because it's not geared, this nation and the timetables of work and the timetables of school and whatever else, they're not geared to make it easy for us to perform. But if we can't perform, at least internally we're attached. Internally we understand the immensity and the propensity of what the Prophet of Allah ﷺ has said, so that we can be constantly connected in our hearts and in our souls, even if we're not connected externally, which is one of the asrar, which is one of the secrets, and that's what the Prophet ﷺ is talking about here. Is that too much? You get that, or is it like too much?
So you're sort of saying if there are things that are not possible for you to complete, so long as you want to have the capacity to complete them, that's sufficient.
Right.
Does
So,
that make sense?
exactly. So the question was, even there's some things, some deeds we can't perform, ta'at, obedience to Allah, we can't perform. Being attached to that that's not for the fara'id. Okay?
Yeah.
That's not for obligatory things. Sunan al-Huda. The sunnah, let's see what he called it in English. Your prophetic ways of guidance, right? Prophetic tradition of guidance, right? So this is a prophetic tradition that's not where you can't say, oh, I love salat, I want to pray and never pray. No, that doesn't count for that, right? Oh, I want to eat halal, but you never do it. That doesn't count for that. It counts for the sunan and the things that aren't obligatory. So if something's obligatory, all right, but when would it count? Let's say, for example, Allah qadr Allah, you were in jail, Allah qadr Allah, and you couldn't pray your fara'id because of whatever reasons. I mean, we do anyway with our eyes and things, but the love, the attachment to doing qiyam and reciting the Qur'an, or you had, something in your mouth that were doing, torturing you, Allah, whatever the case might be. For whatever reason, you couldn't pray, you couldn't do that thing, but to be tied to wanting to do it, that keeps us connected. So for the sisters, for example, I heard this Shaykh talking the other time about when they can't pray, when the sisters can't pray in that monthly time, it shouldn't be like a holiday, she was saying. Now, I don't know, I don't go through that, alhamdulillah, but that's what she was saying. So that's why I'm relying on what she's saying. So you don't say, this guy's a misogynist, doesn't know I don't know what I'm on about. Of course I don't. But that's what she was saying. She was saying still that even if a woman can't perform the prayers because she's got what they call it udhr shar'i, she's got an excuse in the sharia, a legal dispensation, right? still she should be connected. That's what she was saying. Oh no, that's what she was saying. She was saying that one should be connected in terms of not forgetting it's time for dhuhr, not forgetting it's time for asr, and not only that, taking time out of one's day to remember Allah in some way.
She was saying that the language that we use is what makes us feel like it's a holiday, whereas it shouldn't just be, we don't have prayer, it should be, we have dhikr or we have dua instead. So, yeah, still being, it doesn't mean you lose all connection.
So that's the internal state.
Yeah.
Right? That's the internal state. That we don't lose that connection, that we don't lose the love for that thing, and don't lose the zeal to be close to Allah through the things that Allah Azza wa Jal has engendered upon us as beloved to Allah, or as this one is, the prophetic tradition of guidance. In other words, that particular thing. So that it's a twofold thing. One to perform it, and the other one to be connected to it, to love it, to yearn to be able to perform it. So that's the twofold. That's why the hadith it's such a seminal and important hadith. He says, "Man sarrahu an yalqa Allah ghadan musliman." So whoever would be happy to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tomorrow as a Muslim, as a believer. فَلْيُحَافِظْ عَلَى هَؤُلَاءِ الصَّلَوَاتِ حَيْثُ. So the person should be committed to the 5 times prayers. Right? One should be committed to the 5 times. That's the muhafadha that was mentioned in footnote 35, I believe it is. That's the muhafadha. One should be, he says, attentive heart, actively listening, pure in disposition to Allah, singular in regard of the sacredness of the time, and complete in its sanctity. That's for the individual praying. Right? That's for the individual praying. And then he says, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ شَرَعَ لَكُمْ شَرَعَ لِنَبِيِّكُمْ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ سُنَّنَ الْهُدَى وَإِنَّهَا مِن سُنَنِ الْهُدَى. So he talks about that it's about from the sunan to pray in the masajid, because he says, did I say it in English? I didn't know. Sorry, sometimes I forget. فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ, Allah Azza wa Jal has shara'a, has made obligatory, or shara'a has made law, made legal, or was made part of the law for the Prophet of Allah ﷺ. Okay? This is Sunnah al-Huda, the prophetic ways of guidance, the prophetic tradition of God. Is it too fast? Am I like, are you getting it? Are you sure? Positive? You don't look like you're getting it. If you're not, just tell me and we'll explain it in a different way. Yeah, tell me so I know. You can see it. So tell me what you don't understand, so we can explain it, inshallah. We're here to learn.
It's like the last part that you said.
Which part? Sorry to put you on the spot, but everyone, I know there's others. You're not the only one, but you're the only one courageous enough to speak. Which part? Which part? No, take your time. So what in a nutshell, we used to study law. We used to get the nutshell to torts. It was like 60 pages book. You used to read it, but you didn't just understand anything. So in a nutshell, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made certain ways for us to get close to Him, and some ways, like for example, going in khalwa, going in seclusion, getting away from people. Those things they're not so high on the list of things that is beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But some things are very, very high on the list of Allah. In other words, they're beloved to Allah. Whoever performs those things will become beloved to Allah. And in the situation about praying in congregation, that's one of them. As a matter of fact, to Allah Azza wa Jal, it's such a beloved thing that it's called Sunan al-Huda. We know about Sunnah, yeah? Sunnah, the things the Prophet did. Well, this is a Sunnah about God. This is a Sunnah that if one performs it, one will be guided. Guided where? Where? Exactly right. You're smarter than you think, mashallah. Right? So, whoever performs this Sunnah of praying in congregation, this is so beloved to Allah, the prayer in congregation, that He's given it to the Prophet of Allah, because he's the one who showed us how to do these things. And He said, Ya Rasulullah, I give you this Sunnatul Huda, this prophetic tradition of guidance. It's a terrible way to explain it.
Just to tie in my head, sitting in the mosque is one of those things that takes you to Allah, part of
the prayer in congregation is the Sunnah al-Huda. Okay. So the prayer in congregation itself, and so what he's talking about is have the intention for that Sunnah. That's at the end of it. That's right down the end. Maybe you need to go down the end of the road first and come back. Right? So the prayer in congregation is the intention. And if we have the intention to pray that prayer in congregation, consistently committed to it and consistent in it, then inshallah we would have encompassed the sunnah. Can I just use the word sunnah al-huda? You understand what that means or not?
It's sunnah that has an additional benefit of granting guidance.
You could say that. No.
What does Tul Huda mean? Like the last part of Sunnah Tul Huda, what does that mean?
It's just sunnah. It's just of the sunnah of guidance, if you like. So what it means is whoever performs this sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ will be guided. That's what it literally means. Sunnatul Huda. Whoever performs that sunnah will remain guided. And the rest of the hadith, whoever doesn't, falls into dalala, which is misguidance. Now.
So, the sunnah of praying in congregation, is that an example? Even though that's not a serious one, a more beneficial one.
It is serious. That's a good word because we're going to come to that. It's extremely serious.
But it's not fun.
Exactly. This only counts for sunnah, not for fara'id. No.
It's not possible for you to pray in congregation because
whatever it is.
doesn't permit it. Not why, permit it.
Alhamdulillah, he's corrected himself.
So long as you have that want and that desire that if your life did facilitate it, you would do it.
Exactly.
Is that sufficient? Will that bring you the same degree of closeness or not?
Yeah, if they say udhr al-shar'i, so the a'dhar, the reasons for not doing it is sickness, living far away from the masajid, these types of things. So for the sisters, it doesn't count. Like, you just get a mat and pray on it. And just use that mat just to pray, read Qur'an, do dhikr, revise for your book of intentions class. Or you don't do that, eh? Sorry. Whatever it is, right? Whatever your intention to do good deeds is on that prayer mat. Fikr, tafakkur about the things, your own life, thinking about, pondering, on that prayer mat. It's done. It's done. And we'll get into the conditions of what it is in a sec. But I just want to get your head around the issue of this is a special type of sunnah.
Oh, because it's only in the masjid.
Well, not directly. Well, hang out a bit and we'll talk about what the conditions of it are.
Then it would be accessible.
Yeah, I'm saying you got the best deal. You don't have to go to the masjid.
Okay.
Men have to go. Like we can't really put a prayer mat and pray on it. And men, you can and you should, but that's not where the real reward is. The real reward is going to a place. The condition is the adhan's got to be called. So going to a place where the adhan is called. So for sisters, you can call the adhan, but not in a super loud voice so that the neighbors hear you. Just a little voice that you intend to call the adhan. You make the iqamah. Get the reward. I mean, like what? Like I said, the sisters always complaining. They always complain about everything, but outside of the deen, jokes aside, right? But in the deen, but this is easy for the sisters. This is easy. This is the easiest thing. You get all the rewards of all the things we've been talking about since we started on the book. For just going to a little mat that you've got aside, you're not doing anything else with. I'll come to you and making those intentions with the intentions. With the intentions, that's what ilm gives you. Knowledge gives you the shortcut. Like a person. Why do people go to uni? People who go to uni, I don't know if it's the true fact, but it should be. People who go to uni, they earn more money, right? If you got a master's, you earn more money. Yeah? If you got a doctorate, you earn more money, generally speaking. Of course, that's not the case, but generally speaking. Because you're more educated. Same in the deen. You know some basic things, you got a certain level. You're pretty educated, you got another level. And the rewards you can earn, like we said last time, the Prophet said, ﷺ, that the alim, the educated man who's sleeping, is ashaddu ala shaitan, more harsh than on shaitan, than I think 100 or 1,000, I forget. 1,000 abid, 1,000 just worshippers who are not educated. So that's why that's what you come in to do. Get to Allah, and this is the way. Easy. Cash money, they say. They used to say, I don't know what they say now. Safe as houses and whatever. This is it for rewards. No. Well, that's what the Shafi'i scholars talk about. That's the difference between, the question is having a waqf. So a waqf is something that you only use in terms of the shara, only use for the ibadah. So The reason why they said it's a waqf is because that house is the house of Allah forever. So the house of Allah, this dedicated house of Allah, that's where they can have Jum'ah prayer as well. If that's for Jum'ah prayer, Friday prayers, that's the shart and the Shafi'i. Other madhab have different things, but that's what the Shafi'is have. So if a person declares something a waqf, that it's given to Allah for the end till the end of time, because the waqf doesn't just stop when the person dies. So if I have something and I declare it to be waqf, it continues. They call it a perpetuity. It keeps on going. It's perpetual. It keeps on going. In the end, if it gets torn up like a mushaf, a Qur'an, if it gets torn up, well, what do they do? What do? They burn it. So you got to destroy it in a way where it doesn't stay around. But it's not sacred just because we declared it to be a waqf. Yeah? Just something that doesn't mean it's sacred in that, like, no one touches it and all that. It just means it is dedicated for the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Something that's dedicated for the worship of Allah should or shouldn't have more rewards in your mind. Something that's dedicated for a sports ground. Something that's dedicated for education. In Australia, they're tax deductions. If you've got something dedicated for education, a waqf, a trust, you get tax deduction. For religion, tax deduction. Because it's specific for a specific cause that has so much benefit throughout society. That's the reason why they've got tax deductions on it. So imagine you do something just for Allah. Say, Allah, this thing I bought and I'm using just for you, for nobody else. Alright, so we know what Sunnah al-Huda is? Yeah, we cool? Alhamdulillah. If you don't know, just ask a question. If you can't ask, write it down, give it to one of your friends or whatever, or send it up. Because there's no point coming you don't understand. That's almost as bad as coming and not revising. So he says, innaha min, and then the hadith, wa innaha, then ta'keed. إنها من سنن الهدى ولو أنكم صليتم في بيوتكم كما يصلي المتخلف هذا المتخلف في بيته لتركتم سنة نبيكم. So he says it twice. He says that prayer is the sunnah, and there's a ta'keed, there's a confirmation. He says فإنهن من سنن الهدى. There's 5 congregational prayers. وَلَوْ أَنَّكُمْ صَلَّيْتُمْ فِي بِيُوتِكُمْ. If to pray in your houses, like the person who's mutakhallif, what did he use the word in English? He used like a laggard. I don't know. But the mutakhallif, someone who's breaching. Takhalluf is there's two. The literal meaning is to be backwards, laggard. That's to be a slacker. But that's not really what it means there. In terms of Allahu Alim, what it means. The mutakhallif is someone who breaches. They're breaching the sunnah. They're not following the sunnah al-huda, whatever we call it. You know what it is, sunnah al-huda, the prophetic thing. If you were to pray in your houses, you've left his sunnah alayhi salatu wasalam. Like, let's just try and picture that. Left his sunnah. What are the 2 things we're supposed to do on earth? Follow the book of Allah, and what else? Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So do you see why it's tied to hidayah? See why it's tied to guidance? That's why it's there's heaps of reasons, but that's one of them. It's tied to guidance because to leave the sunnah is to leave one part of the deen, really. Because we say what? How many shahadat? How many testifications do we give? 2. What's the first one? Ashhadu an Allah ilaha illallah. First one is the existence of the oneness of Allah Azza wa Jal. What's the second one? Muhammad Rasulullah. There's 2. We can't just play one and not the other. It doesn't work. It's not accepted for us. So to leave that sunnah is to leave hidayah. It's to leave guidance. And we'll talk about it, okay? Then he says, already read it in Arabic, okay? So there isn't one person, one individual that they purify themselves by making the wudu, and they go to the masjid, and they're excellent in their performance of wudu, making sure they take care of it exactly, and that includes the istinja, the purification beforehand after relieving oneself, call of nature, except that one goes to one of the masajid, except that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we spoke about this hadith, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says with every step they get a reward. And Allah elevates them one level with every step. How big is the level? Come on, man, don't do this to me. 3 weeks in a row. Okay, from the earth and the heaven. Jazakallah khair, barakallah feek. Every step, Allah elevates you from the earth to the sky. Every step. And forgives the sin. Or we spoke about that. Even if you park right outside the masjid or whatever, every turning of the wheel, or if you catch the bus, or you catch the train, or whatever, take your hovercraft or whatever, everything is counted. He says, didn't you see that person that takhallaf, that they, in this sense, I suppose, that the only person that would, didn't you see that the only person that would slacken in that regard is an open munafiq? Like, there's the other side of guidance. That's the other side of guidance. One side of guidance is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. The other side is that, what? You're not going to follow the sunnah. What's the status if someone doesn't follow the sunnah in terms of this hadith and not doing that sunnah? The hypocrite. Who's lower in the hellfire when a'udhu billah? A hypocrite or a disbeliever? MashaAllah alaikum. They're in the dark al-asfal. They're in the lowest of pits of hell. Why? Because they outwardly expressed that they were Muslim and acted like they were Muslim, but inwardly, when a'udhu billah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ma'loom al-nifaq, everyone knows they're a munafiq, everyone knows they're that's a big thing. You know what I mean? Like our lives today in particular, it's all show basically on our social medias and whatever else. It's all about show. But this is saying ma'loom, it's common knowledge that this person is who that is. And he says back in the days, the Prophet saying that the person used to come to the masjid and pray in congregation, the man, and two people were holding him up during the prayers. All right, that he couldn't stand of his own accord. That's how important it was.
Because he was drunk?
No, because he was sick, ill. Because he was so ill, so two men he would rest on their shoulders to pray. That's how important it is. So that's the sunnatul huda. That's the whole hadith. So you can get an example and an understanding of how imperative it is for the believers, right? So, nah. That's what the hadith is saying. So the question is, if you pray the Friday prayer in congregation, well, you have to. That's the difference, though. So this is only for sunnah, for the men, not for the women. For the men, it's fard. It's an obligation for each man to pray Jummah. So that Jummah doesn't count. Jummah is, and so, like we said, the congregation is not just the masjid. It's the place where adhan is called. So there's a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says that if someone's out in the fields and there's no one around, he has to pray. He should call adhan and then pray. So the calling of the adhan is the critical factor. So if you've got your prayer mat there, whether it's waqf or not, doesn't matter. And that's but it's better. Why would you not make it waqf? Like, if you're going to use it for that thing? Just don't put it as a doormat out the front. Basically, that's it. Yeah? So, if you call the adhan, if you're a sister in particular, you call the adhan, you have to call it very loud, and that's it. Pray there. That's your intention. Sunnatul huda. Guaranteed you can get 5 prayers every day. And like someone asked this last week, what if I'm at work? I said, take it with you. Or if you can't take it with you, I got one like that. It's a little fits into a little bag. Have 2. Have one at home. It's a nice, comfy, put your yoga mat underneath it so your knees don't get sore and you can sit on it for hours and hours. And have your point. Make them both waqf. If you're a sister, in particular. And then wherever you are, just whip it out. Do your prayers with you. Make quick. Then even if you're outside, Allahu Akbar, enough so you can hear. Enough so a couple of people, a couple of meters away can hear. Not too loud. Make the iqamah and then hit it. It's there for you. It's there for you. You should never leave that. This side of the room, sisters, should never leave that. Ever. There's no reason for you to. Because that's part of the prayer in congregation. One of the conditions they put on it is that a place where you pray prayer. It's considered that goes under this hadith, the adhan and the iqamah, not just the adhan. What for? You're doing it to get the huda. The angels, the Muslim jinns. You're not praying in congregation. What you're doing is you're praying on your prayer mat, and you're getting the thawab, the rewards of praying in jama'ah, even if no one joins you, because the conditions of a place of jama'ah are adhan and iqamah.
And not another person.
Well, that's also there, but there's no one around.
Oh.
You've got your musalla that's a waqf. You've got your portable masjid or mobile masjid, if you like. Right? Don't call it a prayer. And you're going around and you're doing what you have to do. If you can go to them, like go to.
Ability. So if there's nobody around.
Well, for women, it's different. You guys can't do that. You guys got to go to the mosque. But for women, the sunnah isn't for them to do that in that sense. They can if they would like to, but the best place, the Prophet said, the best place for the men is the first rows, and the best place for the women is the very last row. So some scholars said last rows means at home. Why are you gonna diss yourself? What for? If they said, the scholars said the best place for a woman to pray is at home, and you've got your musalla, you've got your prayer mat, you do a little adhan, little iqamah, and you get the reward of Sunnat al-Huda, you'd be crazy.
So it's not about praying in congregation, it's about praying in the equivalent of somewhere where prayer in congregation is prayed.
That's the connotation for yourselves, yeah. We're saying it, make it easy.
Yes.
Don't miss out. Why, if you've got a dispensation being a woman where you don't have to go to Jummah prayer, for example, that's the point of our deen, is to make it easy. So don't miss out on the Sunnat al-Huda just because you just pray, like you're praying anyway. You're not missing it. And what's the difference of making a 1 minute little adhan and a 30-second iqamah? It's not even 1 minute to do the adhan if you're going to do it quickly, right? Why would you miss out on the possibility of getting Sunnat al-Huda? Why would you do that? There's no reason, especially when there's no, there's no obligation for you to go. It's not obligation; it's a sunnah. There's no impetus for you to go to that. Why would you like that's ilm, that's knowledge. That's what our knowledge is for, so we can maximize the benefit with the minimum amount of effort. That's what knowledge gives us. It gives us that opportunity, and that's what the Prophet has given you. All right. So, one interesting point. We all cool? All right. Alhamdulillah. Okay. All good? No.
So that's like a quick recap. If they wanted to have a waqf at home, it will only be counted as
Prayer
jama'ah for them, for the sisters, if they do the adhan and the iqamah for their prayer.
So the only time, the conditions of Salatul Jama'ah, right, are adhan and iqamah. That's one of the conditions. Of course, having other people around is a definite. But let's say, for example, it happens all the time. You go to the mosque. It's happened to me hundreds of times in my life. Go to the mosque. It's time for prayer. There's no one around. I make the adhan, and I make the iqamah, and I pray. What? I'm not going to get the reward of Jama'ah? What do you think? Of course. Not only will I get the reward of Jama'ah, I get the reward of the whole area. Or whoever I get the reward of that person, will get the reward of the whole area for not coming to the masjid. Yeah? What are you talking about? Like to do something that no one else is doing, whoa, that's where it's at. If you can find that prayer, that gift, that talent that Allah has given you that He hasn't given anyone else, that's basically what you're trying to do in your life. All of this connecting to Allah, to find that talent, that gift, that thing that Allah wants you to do, that one thing that Allah wants you to do in your life so He can have rahmah on you and get it, that's what you're trying to do. So if you can do that one, and all these general things are for us to build us so we know Allah to a level where we know that specific thing that counts for us. You have to understand that, that's all right. But one day you will, inshallah. Okay? So, of course, I'm going to get the full rewards, no doubt. It's happened so many times. Or how about one time we went to the mosque, the place was bloody locked. I use the word bloody specifically, like it was locked. Maghrib, place is locked, bro. It's got a big chain. Are you kidding? It was raining as well. Where are we going to go pray? Go to the mosque, it's locked. I should have got the bolt cutters and cut it and astaghfirullah al-azim. At least put a place outside of the masjid. It's not in a carpet, it's undercover. Let the people pray. Or it's locked, or it's in a masjid now. Your prayer mat is 100 times better than a place like that. And then when I've said it to a few brothers, I went Isha, I went this time, locked with a chain. Anyway, so we get it. We get Sunnat al-Huda. The true story, for real. I'm not like making it up. I wish I was making it up. Right? So that's Sunnat al-Huda. That's in accordance with what the muhaddithin say. So now we're talking about ilm. Right? I'm going to take you somewhere where you've never been before, inshallah. You know, it's going to be a little bit hard, but you'll understand something not just about this, but about the deen generally. It's about the interpretations of scholars, how scholars get to where they get to. Because there's a riwayah, there's a different narration that says that whoever leaves it, it's not nifaq, it's kufr. Okay? There's another narration of that hadith, you know, how we said that whoever leaves that sunnatul huda, nobody leaves it except, no one leaves it except an open munafiq, who's an open hypocrite, whose hypocrisy is well known. Yeah? So there's another hadith says, only person that leaves it is someone who's going to go to kufr wa na'udhu billah ta'ala. So that aspect of sunnatul huda is the muhaddithin. You know what a muhaddithin is? The scholars of hadith. Okay? The scholars of hadith say that sunnatul huda is that. To go to the praying congregation and be consistent in doing so, and not leaving it except with an excuse. Okay. So then we go to what the fuqaha say. Now the fuqaha, they're the jurists. They're the legal scholars. Like, you know, you might say academics today. You might. They're not muftis. The ulama is different. They could be. But anyway, they're the people, the jurists, that's the right word for it. They come up with jurisprudence, which is Islamic law. So that's fiqh. You with me or not? Cool? Yeah? Are you sure?
There's different interpretations of that.
Right? So this is not an interpretation though. This is a legal ruling. You with me? So the scholars, the fuqaha, the jurists, they look at the Qur'an, they look at the Sunnah, and they pull out the rulings from that. And they use, you know, a lot of different things to do it. So that's why the rulings change, because the times change. People live in different countries. People, you know, live far away from mosques. So we can't say that whoever doesn't pray in the mosque is a kafir or whatever. There's a hadith that even says that. Yeah? So the jurists pull out the rulings, they apply it to whatever the date, 20th today? 20th of September 2019. Yeah, so the ruling yesterday could have been different today, and the ruling to tomorrow could have been different today. That's law. Not just Islamic law, all laws like that. So I'm trying to take you somewhere different. All laws like that. Once upon a time, they had capital punishment in Australia. And in New South Wales, I think it was in 78 or 81, I can't remember. They outlawed it. Yeah? Once upon a time, you didn't need a license to drive. But now you need a license to drive. Yeah, all these laws are constantly changing because they have to reflect what's going on in society. Sharia is no different. You all right with that?
Maybe I'll wait.
Okay, it's probably better. Okay, that's our deen. I know for us, we're like, whoa, what do you mean it changes? No. Don't let it change. Please don't let it change, because that's jurisprudence. And that, for you and I, it's not going to really be too much that's going to change for us. It's not going to be too much that's going to change for us, because things that, like, for example, smoking, that's a really good example. Cigarette smoke. When it first came out, back in the 30s and 40s, and people, I mean, tobacco's been around for a long time, but when it first became commercial, the scholars said it's makruh, which means detested. Yeah? Because it stinks, and it makes your mouth stink, and it makes your clothes stink, and basically it's a waste of money. They never said it was haram. But as the research came out in the 80s and 90s about la samahallah, cancer, la qadr Allah, gangrene, and all these things, then the scholars said it itself, the actual tobacco isn't haram to smoke it. It's not an intoxicant. It's not made of pork. It doesn't have alcohol in it. You with me? Or not? Yeah? Kind of? Okay, cool. So they said it's haram because of the effect that it has. Yep, because you smoke it, pretty much statistics say someone's going to get sick. That's the development of Sharia. That's a good example, actually. See how it developed? That's what the scholars constantly do. They constantly look at things and they develop it. So when it comes to Sunnatul Huda, that's what we're talking about. All that is just a precursor. You with me? All right? It's a precursor to understand why this will make your life easier in the deen. This will make your life, otherwise I wouldn't tell you. If it's going to make your life harder, I'm not going to tell you. But this will make your life easier. So what do the ulama say Sunnatul Huda is? So, for example, the Hanafi scholars, this is for those of the Hanafi madhab, they say Sunnat al-Huda is like the big things in Islam, what they call the Sha'ira, the symbols of Islam. Adhan, they say it's Sunnat al-Huda. Al-Iqama, Sunnat al-Huda. Adhan is the call to prayer. Iqama. So all these things are Sunnat al-Huda. Okay? They also say, and then there's other sunnah they call it Zawa'id, extra. Doesn't specifically mean extra. Zawa'id means extension. Yeah, that's the best word. That's a great word. Jazakallah khair. Extension sunnahs, right? Like when you're in HSC, you did extension maths or whatever. Extension sunnah. Okay? The extension sunnah is what the Prophet wore, alayhi salatu wasalam. The things he used to like to eat, pumpkin, he used to like to eat pumpkin, alayhi salatu wasalam, watermelon, alayhi salatu. They're the extension sunnah. So they differentiate, this is the Hanafi scholars. They differentiated between them saying that whoever leaves Sunnat al-Huda, yeah, without a valid legal excuse, like we said, sickness and being far away from the masjid and whatever it might be, overslept, whatever, then they're basically sinful. Not really sinful, but basically it's a lesser level, right? Are you with me or not? It's not that hard, but you need to know the background we should do, so it's really not that hard. And they said whoever leaves the extension sunnah without a valid excuse, it's okay. Okay, so they gave the example because fiqh, law has to have an enforcer. If there's no law, there's no enforcement, there's no, like Sharia today in the world, there's no Sharia because there's no enforcement unless it's voluntary. Can't have a law that's voluntary. Imagine the speed limit was voluntary. No one's going to follow it. Who's going to follow it? No one's going to follow it. Right? No one's going to follow. Okay, so they said that the person who outwardly, which is who outwardly leaves a sunnah and huda, who's that person? Okay, open, ma'loom, and everyone knows their nifaq. That person, that it's not like doing something fara'id. They're told ta'zir, yu'atab. They're told, what are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you doing that? Snap out of it. You shouldn't leave it. That's the type of thing that goes on. Now, please do. So that's a good question. So does a person become a hypocrite when they don't do it completely? There's two aspects to it. The first, as we said, is the internal, to be tied to it, to want to do it, to have a yearn to do it, to have a zeal to do it, to have a desire to do it, to have everything in my power to want to do it. That's the first part. The second part is the performance of it. Now, if I can't perform it because of extrinsic situations or intrinsic, I'm sick, something's going on, whatever the story is, that's shari'i, then it's okay. But even when I don't perform it, the zeal should be inside to want to perform it. That's the difference. The open munafiq or the ma'loom, the known munafiq, doesn't care. They're ambivalent or they're not waffle. How about people say, it's just a sunnah? That's a very dangerous statement. For a Muslim, it's a very, very dangerous statement. It's just a sunnah. Because, like we said, we're asked to do two things, the Qur'an and the sunnah. We're asked to follow both of them. Okay? All right, so the fuqaha say that the person who leaves it, the fuqaha, they don't talk about nifaq or not nifaq or whatever, because this is about law, right? Nifaq is for the muhaddithin. You know the difference, eh? The muhaddithin talk about hadith, they explain hadith. The fuqaha come out with legal rulings. Legal rulings, breach of laws has to have ramifications. So you might say in today's day and age, they might give them a fine, okay? For the person who doesn't go. Or they might shame them in a public paper, media, because that's one of the reasons they have media. Because one of the reasons of punishment is to deter others, deterrence. That's why media go to court and they take, normally it's salacious stories. They go there, they have the law report already. They take notes and they publish it. So and so did whatever to let others know. You do that, you're going to be in the paper too. Watch out. Or one current affair or some crazy thing like that, right? So that's what the fuqaha talk about. That's the Hanafis. They say it's almost wajib, in other words. It's almost wajib, which it's almost an obligation, because when you leave an obligation, there's a consequence. And although this consequence isn't corporal punishment in the sense of ta'zir or what they call the qisas, the whippings and the slapping, the cutting of wrists and all that stoning. It's not that level. It's not that level. But still, there's a repercussion. There's still a physical repercussion. So that's why they say it's not fard, it's not sunnah, it's between the two. That's the Hanafi scholars. They have a hukm of wajib. The Shafi'is call it sunnah mu'akkada. So the Shafi'is have sunnah mu'akkada is sunnatul huda. Now I'll let you finish writing so you can bear with me. Because it's okay, finish so you don't miss the point. Because this is an important point so that when you're out and about and you're hearing things and you're watching things no one's out and about anymore. Everyone's at home on their phone or on the thing. So that's the old call, out and about. So now it's in and entrenched in Alabama. What's it? Not going nowhere, just stuck in the one spot. So when you're stuck and you're Googling or reading or you're hearing a sheikh or whatever or saying, this is going to help you. Okay? So the Shafi'is, they say it's a sunnah mu'akkada. Sunnatul huda, it comes in the hadith. That expression, sunnatul huda, those words, they come in the hadith. Right? So the muhaddithin talk about what they are. The jurists, the scholars, the Shafi'i scholars say what it means is, in other words, that's the istilah, that's the jargon. A technical word in law. Well, I can't think of it. Because I'm a lawyer, it's hard to think of a word that most people know in law. Like caveat. Is another word caveat? No. Some of you do.
There's a caveat to the statement.
Right? There's a caveat. You know what a caveat is?
She's a lawyer.
Oh, good, great. Well, easy for you,
It's like
mashallah.
an
Okay.
apostrophe at the end of a slogan, like terms and conditions apply.
Right? So a caveat is a block on someone. That's a Latin word. It's not even an English word, but it's a technical word, right? It's jargon. It's a technical word. So the word sunnatul huda in terms of jurisprudence is jargon to mean sunnah mu'akkada. It means a sunnah that the Prophet never left, alayhi salatu wassalam. Does that help or not? Does that make you more confused? I know some of you are confused. So if you are, please tell me so we can explain it a different way. Because it's a very technical thing. Why am I telling you? Because when you hear one sheikh talk about the same thing, let's say the word sunnatul huda. Let's say sunnatul huda so we understand. One sheikh says sunnatul huda, he says one thing. Another sheikh says sunnatul huda, he says another thing. You're going, wait a minute, that sheikh's wrong. This sheikh, it's not the case. Most of the time it's not the case. Sometimes it is. But what it is they're talking about it from a different discipline. From a different perspective. That's it. That's simple. Yeah? But it's important to have an example and to know what it is so you don't get confused. Of course there's differences. You know there's differences between New South Wales and Victoria about the interpretation of law. And the Supreme Court's decided different things. There's different. Same words, different meanings. Can't think of anything off the top of my head, but it's the same sort of thing. Because there's a difference between the explanation of the text of the hadith, Sunnatul Huda. You follow it, you go to Allah. You don't follow it, you get lost. Plain and simple for the hadith. To the definition in terms of law. It can't just be that because law has ramifications, has enforcement. Simple as that. Yeah? You got it, eh?
Yeah, I'm slightly lost after he said caveat.
Oh, still thinking about caveat. So what I'm saying is the word caveat, it means certain things. Like when we said caveat, the brother was saying that, I say this, but I caveat my statement by saying that, it only happens on Mondays. So it's a reservation. But the technical legal term for caveat is to block someone from being able to deal with their own property. You with me? So it's a technical word.
It's a placeholder.
Oh, okay.
Right? It's a technical word. So sunnatul huda, we're looking at it in the same word. Technical word. Technically in hadith it means whoever follows it gets guided. But technically in law, that's not what it means, does it? What does it mean in law? Do you remember?
Enforcement.
Exactly right. Perfect. That's it. That's all you need to know. It's not. You don't have to know everything I'm saying to you. You have to get the concept. Yeah? That one word, the same word for a different. The Mufassirin talk about it one way. In other words, those the exegetes of Qur'an that explain Qur'an, they talk about it one way. Al-Usul, in other words, the philosophy of the Sharia, talk about it another way. Yeah? Lugha, the actual linguistic meaning it has another meaning. And all things are like that with language. It's always like
Which
that.
one do we take as superior?
Well, there's no superior. That's a really good question.
Correct.
That's an excellent question. Which one's right?
Yeah.
Which one's right? You tell me. They're all right. And it depends on the situation to which one you apply. Yeah?
So if you apply any of them, you're not going to be wrong.
Yes, that's right.
Depending on
It's whatever. Not like don't pick and choose, but
Yeah.
what suits.
So if you're talking to the common person, you're not going to talk about the jurisprudential things I just spoke to you about. You're going to say Sunnatul Huda is what? Exactly, right? It's the prophetic means to guidance. You're not going to go in and talk about all that other stuff. What for? It's going to confuse them like you almost got confused. Yeah? But now, why am I saying that to you? So when you hear a word in the Sharia, when you hear a concept in the Sharia, one sheikh says something, another sheikh says something, don't just go start rubbishing the sheikh. You know, you've got the capacity to understand that different sciences have different ways of looking at the same thing. The jargon means the technical word means one thing in one science and something else in another science. Tamam? Yes. Yes. Well, the difference is now you're getting even more technical. So the question is, what's the difference between wajib and mu'akkada? Well, it's a philosophical, it's usul al-fiqh. The philosophical, I don't know if I want to explain it to you because I don't. Well, if you follow Hanafi, it's one thing. If you follow Shafi'i, the only real difference, I suppose, is that the words that are used. But in reality, they're both the same thing. Because if there's something that's a sunnah mu'akkada and a person leaves it, purposefully speaking, it's the same result. But the difference is in the so-called enforcement. That's the only thing. Because only the Hanafis use the word sunnatul huda, right? This is Hashid ibn Abidin. He's like, you're asking a very, very technical question. So I don't really want to answer because I don't want to confuse everybody. That goes back to the jurists. So the punishments change over time. You know what they used to do back in the day? Ta'zir, get someone, put him backwards on a donkey, a man of course, put him backwards on a donkey, cover his face in dirt, take off his shirt, and parade him around the village. That was, so the punishment depends on the time. If you did that now, RSPCA would be after you. There's so many groups. You can't do that today. That's insanity, really, right? Then be the Australian Psychology Association. Look what you're doing and whatever else. And
but how does someone know that someone has left something on purpose, other than that person and God?
The ma'loom munafiq. Someone they talk about it. They don't care. These people.
Oh, I see.
A ma'loom munafiq is going off.
My other question was, how can a scholar make an assessment that someone, like, make the call that someone is?
All right, so it's another technical question about enforcement. If someone gets accused of a crime, what happens? What happens? Today you get accused, except for probably speeding because it's strict liability. Right. So there's a court case. You can't just go around whipping and smashing and putting people on donkeys and cutting, and you can't. It's due process. So what normally happens in that situation is they'll bring that person say, I don't care. And even if they say, I don't care, they have to go to rehabilitation first. Yustatab, the word in technical speak is yustatab. They go off, they get here. Do you understand what you're saying? I know you're saying that. That's the shara, that's rahmah. Where's the rehabilitation in our system? Tell me, you're a lawyer. Where's the rehabilitation for criminal? Do you do criminal law? Okay, then I'll ask somebody else. There's no rehabilitation. Go to Long Bay Jail, it's all full of mental patients, like people with mental health issues. They're not criminals, most of them. There are some serious criminals there. Most of them, 81% don't even have a father. That's the statistic. So what are you talking about? Sharia is much more rahmah than that. So this is not for you to go around telling people.
Should we look to it in our day and age as just an explanation of the severity of something, of how bad something is?
Exactly. Because this is the thing. Sharia, while we're on that point, doesn't care what you do in your own home. Right? There's nothing in our Sharia that says find out, put cameras, CCTV in people's homes. What are they doing? The things that you do in private that are haram, the things that an individual does in private, it's between that individual and Allah. Sharia doesn't care. In other words, Allah doesn't care. Of course he cares, but Sharia doesn't. In other words, the legal enforcement of things, you go, someone drinks alcohol or some halal, whatever, in their own home or somewhere that's off the street that's unknown. Where does Sharia come into play?
When you're literally doing it.
Right? When something becomes public. Why?
Spread of corruption.
Because it destroys the moral, the ethical foundations of a society. Once the moral and ethical foundations of a society destroyed, that society is destroyed. Look at don't listen to me. Go read about the Romans, what they did to get go read about the Ottomans, what they did. Go read about the Greeks, the Carthaginians, the Persians, whoever you want. Any society the English. What happened? Why did their empire finish? Because of the corruption. Open corruption. Human beings are always going to be, we're made of ajal. We're always fast. The luman jahula, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. We're oppressive and we're ignorant. Well, that's how we are. So that's always, but where does the Sharia get involved? Even for adultery, and adultery means someone who's married, it has to be 4 upright witnesses that witness the penetration. Where are you going to get that? Where are you going to get that? In other words, it means when zina and fornication is become so widespread that people basically doing it on the street or videoing it and putting it up for people to see. That's the destruction of society. Once that happens, Allah said, don't listen to read your history books. Read your history books. As soon as they became elitist, basically, and the few ruled the many, and they were oppressive, that society finished. That's known throughout history. Known throughout history. And so that's the reason. No.
That's a side question.
Please do. I think we need a side question.
So that 4 witnesses thing, where does that fall into the scope of rape?
Now, rape's completely different. So rape is a accusation. Doesn't need 4 witnesses. Rape. It's a criminal act. It's different to that. It's different. It's a different act than 4. But I know the reason why you're asking, but it's because it's convoluted today. Like what happens? The reason why the Sharia gets into a lot of troubles these days is political. It's not religious. The religious people, the proper religious people, they don't want to go. Like I asked Habib Kadim when he was here last time. I said, Habib, when was the last time that there was qisas in Hadramaut? In other words, when was the last time someone got their hand chopped or someone was stoned? He couldn't tell me. Like he's, mashallah. And his father is a mu'arrikh. He's one of the best historians going around, Habib Ja'far. And he couldn't. What does that mean? It means it probably hasn't happened for a very, very, very long time. Where there's real deen, the people of deen don't want to do that. Abu Hanifa, Shafi'i, Malik, these people, they're not the ones administering the punishments. Who's administering punishments? Right? The governor. The Khalifa. The Khalifa. No, I'm not talking about that. Originally, the Imams aren't doing that. The Imams aren't administering it. The Imams, they're making the laws from istinbat, from taking taking the meanings of the Qur'an and the Sunnah and saying that's what Allah wants. But they're not the ones going out. They're saying, even the Prophet said when a lady came and said, did zina, he tried to get rid of her once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. And the other man came and said, did zina, he said, no, maybe he just kissed, maybe he just fondled, maybe he just, and the guy worked, he goes, mate, he's trying to get rid of me. And on the 3rd time, he got out of there and the Prophet left him. Right? So it's not that's what the case is. But what happens today is the so-called pseudo-politicians in some country where they want to establish their credentials in a Muslim, not some country, in a Muslim country. So I come along, I want to establish my credentials, I want to rule the country. It's a Muslim country. What do? I whip up a fervor of I'm going to bring back the golden age of Islam and you can trust me and I follow the Qur'an, I follow the Sunnah. There's nobody like me and all my cronies are around saying, yeah, this bloke's going to do it. So who's the easiest target? Who are the most oppressed people on the face of the earth? Women and children. Easy target. Easy target. Whip up a bit of a fervor, get a woman, stone her, fix her up there. Say, look, I'm implementing Sharia. I'm going to bring, and that's the vast, all of them that I've ever, to be specific, I've never read anything other than that. In Nigeria and Uganda and countries where there's a very large Muslim population, That's what these guys are doing. That's what it's about. Afghanistan, all that. They don't want Sharia. Habib, that's not how you implement Sharia anyway. That's not how you implement Sharia. Not in a place where people are not into the Sharia. You got to do what the Prophet did in Mecca. You got to call the people. When there's a critical mass, like any movement ever in the history of humankind, when there's a critical mass of people moving in a particular direction, you'll get what you want. If there's not, then the only way to get them to move is all the big despots and tyrants we've ever heard of. The Stalins and the Pharaohs, the Pharaohs. How did they control their people? With power, with guns. And democracy is no different. If we think it is, we're lying to ourselves. What are that? Preemptive strikes. What's that? The dhulm. And who are the preemptive strikes against generally? The poorest, weakest people in the whole. Well, once any movement, Islam included, what were the Ottomans doing? They were invading Romania, invading Armenia. They were invading. No, other than that. Because it became mulk al-adur, as the Prophet said. It's just about military might and power. That's all. I said, see you later. We don't need you. I don't want you here. You're trying to represent me and you're doing dhulm. You're oppressing the people. Move to the side. I'll get someone. يحبونهم ويحبوا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves them and they love Allah. Love, he said. Not implement the Sharia. Don't worry about that. Love Allah and Allah loves them. So where the people are true about their faith, I'm going to go to that. When did ever guns ever solve a problem? Except if it's self-defense. All the Islamic movements since the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they moved militarily. When did they ever resolve the problem? When the colonials came to Australia, right, and they colonized Australia and they came with guns and whatever else, have they solved the problem? 220 odd years later, is the problem solved? It's not. It never does. It's a temporary solution for a long-term problem. And when we start to think with force and might, then we've forgotten Allah. If we think punishing people and chopping is going to bring back the deen, then we're seriously deluded. Seriously. Love is what will bring back the deen. Love. True love for Allah first and foremost. And secondly, love for our fellow human beings and wanting the best for them. That's what brings back the deen. Check it out. Check it out. Don't listen to me. Check it out. See what he did, alayhi salatu wasalam. See what he said, alayhi salatu wasalam. See how he treated his enemies and his detractors. See. And if you implement that, then you'll get it. All right? So we've been going way too long. Can we stop? Is there any questions in terms of clarification? Yeah? So the two takeaways for the class are Sunnatul Huda and what that means for us. And the difference of opinion of scholars is not necessarily just based on one guy sees it this way and one guy sees it that way, or one scholar sees it this way, another sees it that way. It can also, and generally that's what it is based on the different science that's being used to interpret the primary sources, being the Qur'an and the Sunnah. They're the two takeaways, yeah? All good? Any questions about anything else? Problem.
Just on the congregational prayer, if you're doing the congregational prayer at someone's house or in your own house, with your wife or children, but you didn't go to the mosque, is that still fulfilling the sunnah of congregational prayer?
Who can answer that knowing the conditions of what congregational prayer is?
You've done the adhan, you've done the iqamah.
Right? You've done the adhan, you've done the iqamah.
It might help if you had a waqf.
Yeah. So that's why the adhan should always be called, and that's why the iqamah should always be called, to make sure that one falls within that category. Because the masjid is the best place, but this is Australia again, right? And it's a 15, 20 minutes sometimes. You can't park there. It's an adventure. That's not saying that it's an excuse, because we go to work, but the thing with work, you just go to the one place and that's it. So it's 5 times, not just once. So those things have to be factored in, right? The pressure of life, the standard of living, all those things have to be factored in. But really, Fajr, right, don't really have much of an excuse. Isha these days is around 7, so depending on what time you come or whatever else, those two should pretty much be there. Pretty much. Yeah, we have a late night and whatever, and things happen, but generally it should be there. And when we can't pray in the masjid, we have to do our level best to try and pray with somebody else. particularly for the brothers. We have to try and find a place, find someone, whether it's a wife, it's okay. If it's a child, normally focus on the tamyiz, 7, 8, 9, 10, then inshallah it's okay. But the issue is this: if I'm praying at home every day, not ever wanting to go to the masjid, saying, oh, this is enough, I've completed my jama'ah, when I'm capable of going to the masjid, that's an issue. That's where it becomes an issue, because it's sunnatul huda.
So you try to do your utmost best,
And then
whatever happens.
isn't that our whole goal in life? Ihsan, try and do our best in whatever we can, and then if we can't, according to circumstance, then we try and go down at least to the bare minimum. No. So that's a good question. So the actual prayer in congregation for the Shafi'is is fard kifaya, which means it's fard on the whole community. So one person has to go, like we said, at least, and they say it's as far as you can hear the adhan being called.
Whoa. Just no speakers, but nothing. Just.
Well, it depends how the adhan's being called. If it's being called on speakers, then it's the speakers. Because remember, Ibn Abi Maktoum, I think it was a blind man. He said, Ya Rasulullah, can I have an excuse not to go to the masjid because I live far away and there's no one to bring me and I can't see? He said, yeah, that's okay. Then he waited a bit and the Prophet, then Allah would bring the way. He said, no, if you can hear the adhan, you must come. That's a blind person. Like I said, it doesn't apply so much, but for us it applies. For the men, it's the case. So if you can hear the adhan from where your house is, then you got to go. It's fard kifaya. But we shouldn't think of it that way, because we've got so many dispensations because of the modern world. We should be thinking of a way, can I go? It has to be a priority in my life. The sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. If it's not, then where's my priorities? Where's my priorities there? If it's not that, what's my priorities? To do and follow and emulate whom? That's the takeaway. That has to be. If I can, awesome. If I can't, then one of the people that are under the arsh of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one of the 7, رَجُلٌ قَلْبُهُ مُتَعَلَّقٌ فِي الْمَسَاجِدِ. His heart is muta'allaq, is intrinsically tied to the houses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's your prayer things, prayer mats, whatever you want to call them. He's chilling, reclining under the arsh, kicking back.
So it's like a win-win situation.
But look what the hadith says. Not he spent his whole life in the masjid. His heart is intrinsically connected to the house of Allah. His heart. And what's the other one? If you see someone frequenting the houses of Allah, fashhad lahu bil iman. Bear witness, testify this person's got iman. That's getting rid of the riyah, the showing off, ostentation. All right? Fadl.
Still doable, right? So what's like for that? 20 minutes, 10 minutes?
Before dhuhr?
Yeah.
Before the zawal. So before it goes to the meridian, a couple of minutes before it goes to the meridian. Like 4 or 5 minutes maximum. But except Jummah. In Jummah, it's okay in the Shafi'iyya. So Jummah, you can pray, it doesn't matter.
We pray duha after.
Yeah, well, even on the meridian, you can pray duha if it's Jummah, because Jummah is a time when we should be in the masajid anyway. Shafi'is. Is that it?
Shaykh, a different sort of question, like the heart is where like the intentions and things are formed. What if you get a heart transplant?
It's not heart by the physical heart, it's heart by your essence, the heart of something. Right? If someone says that someone's got a heart of gold, does that mean they got gold in their chest? No, it means they got a good disposition. So when we talk about heart, we don't mean the physical heart, we mean the spiritual heart, one's essence. Metaphorically. Yeah. Tamam? الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خير الأنام والآله وصحبه وسلم. يا رحمن الرحيم ارحمنا برحمتك الواسعة. يا رحمن الرحيم اجعلنا من الذين يتبعون ويواظبون على سنة الهدى والذين يبتعدون عن الضلالة بأجمعها وبأقسامها بفراقها يا رحمن بتفريقها يا رحمن الراحمين. نسألك أن توفقنا لما هو خير لنا في الحياة وبعد الممات. نسألك أن تجعلنا من الذين يتبعون سنة النبي عليه أفضل الصلاة بإحسان وبإتقان. نسألك يا رحمن الراحمين أن تجعلنا قرة عين مشايخنا وتجعل مشايخنا قرة عين النبي محمد صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. ونسألك يا رحمن الراحمين أن تعيد علينا من بركاتهم وأنوارهم وعلومهم وأسرارهم. ونسألك يا رحمن الراحمين أن تغفر لنا ولوالدينا ولوالدينا والذين سبقونا بالإيمان واجعلنا من الذين يتبعون ما إِذَا سَمِعْنَا بِإِحْسَانٍ وَإِتْقَانٍ. Ya Allah, we ask you to elevate our status in this world and the next, and we ask you to make those people that emulate and are steadfast and consistent in their performance of the Sunnah al-Huda in all circumstances and situations, and make our hearts of those people who are tied to your house, Ya Allah, and who are tied to you and tied to your Prophet Ali Abdul Salatu wa Taslim. Make of those people, Ya Allah, that become scholars, Ya Allah, ulama al-alimina wa ulama al-arifina, the scholars that practice what they preach and that know you, Ya Allah. Make us of those people, iftalina fatu al-arifina. Open upon us, Ya Allah, the gnosis to you, so we can understand you and worship you in the way that you like and the way that is most beloved to you. We ask you to make us close to you and make us close to the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. Elevate the difficulties and the trials and the tribulations from the ummah of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi abdul salatu wa azkat taslim. We ask you to protect us and protect the believers, Ya Allah. We ask you to guide the non-believers to that which is best for them, Ya Allah, and that which you're pleased with. بخير ولطف وعافية وإلى حضرة النبي بسر الفاتحة.